Thank you for the overview of our Community Grants Program, Catherine, and thank you for my introduction. Hi. So happy to see so many of you here today. I know you will enjoy today's presentation by John Power. He's the Executive Director of the local nonprofit Marin Villages, a group dedicated to helping older adults in our county successfully remain in their homes, continue to lead active lives, and to stay connected to their communities. It's a neighbors helping neighbors, and its existence has become so important to so many individuals in our Marin County community. It has, as Catherine said more than once actually, been a recipient of an Outdoor Art Club community grant. I know that many of you are familiar with this group. Indeed, I've discovered that many of our Outdoor Art Club members are also in the Venn diagram for Mill Valley Villages members. I first became aware of the Villages not as a group from Marin, but through a quick mention of the Beacon Hill Village in Being Mortal, a book by Atul Gawande. Anne, my college roommate, recommended this book, and since she's been recommending wonderful books to me for more than 50 years, I found a copy and jumped in. Being Mortal is a nonfiction work. It deals knowledgeably and sensitively with the often difficult topics surrounding aging, medical care decisions, and choosing paths forward. It encourages seeking out possibilities for doing one's best to lead a better life all the way to the end. In a chapter titled A Better Life, Beacon Hill Village is described as the Boston program that created neighborhood support for the aged to stay in their homes. I enjoyed the book, and soon after finishing it, spotted a Mill Valley Villages pamphlet on the community info table at our library, and then, same pamphlet, at my dentist's. The ideas of Beacon Hill Village seem to have spread far and wide. You may find that their mission of helping older adults maintain active, independent, and connected lives aligns with the volunteer goals you have set for yourself. Or you may discover that a village's affiliation may help alleviate some of the personal challenges that may now be present in your day-to-day. We're so pleased to have John Power here with us today to tell us more about this wonderful organization. He has been with Marin Villages since 2021, where in his role as executive director, he draws upon his extensive experiences with nonprofits and works diligently to build community and encourage the expansion of opportunities for volunteer engagement. Both volunteers and members needing services are well served by his leadership. He's been described as an upbeat guy with a sense of humor.
Oh, good. I'll take that.
Who, with his tiny team, runs this big operation with grace and goodwill. John is a graduate of UC Berkeley, go Cal, and holds an MBA from Santa Clara University, go Broncos. I had to look that up. He and his partner live in Kentfield. John is a runner and often takes to the trails of Mount Tam. You may have seen him dash past you, or some of you faster runners may have dashed past him.
Yes.
Please welcome John Power, and let's learn more about Marin Villages. I didn't turn it on, did I?
You did. You're good. Okay, I'll come turn you on when you go. Or come over to me and I'll turn you on before you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to bring it way up.
I'm 5'3". Give me a break.
How's that?
Oh, thank you.
Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. And she got me started. Well, what a nice introduction. Thank you very much. And thank you not only for the kind words, but also for your initial context setting, which I'm just going to hopefully build on and create an opportunity for all of you also before the end of the afternoon that we have together to ask any questions that you might have about things that I don't cover. I know that this is not Marin Village's first time presenting to this group. I understand that we presented many, many years ago when our Mill Valley Village was called Homestead Village. It was one of our initial villages. Oh. And then again, I think when Mill Valley Village was launched, and I'm going to talk through our 6 villages, but Mill Valley Village has always been the pace setter, I think, and remains our biggest and arguably most active village. So also, I thank you for the beautiful nosegay. I have an event this evening. I'm going to wear it as a boutonniere. What we're going to talk about today, what I'm going to talk about, is getting older. Won't that be fun?
Yeah.
We're all doing it. We're all doing it. We're all doing it. And along the way, I'm going to let you in on a little secret, although that secret seems to be out of the bag. The secret is Marin Villages. Some of you probably have never heard of Marin Villages. Some of you, I'm certain, are asking, where is that? Where are they? We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then there are many of you who I see and recognize who have been affiliated with Marin Villages, and we are ever grateful for you for being part of our community, either as a member or a volunteer, or likely both, especially if you're part of this group. And let me just also add, whoever it is who's putting the pamphlets around everywhere, thank you, keep at it. I think that might be Sarah or Janice or Patty, it's someone, but thank you for doing that. So we're lucky here in Marin County. Marin County is the oldest county in the Bay Area. It's among the oldest counties in the country. And by that, I don't mean it's been around for that long. I mean that its people are older. The average age here in Marin, 47 years old, is older than most other counties here in California and across the country. But that's good news for us when you think about it, right? Sure. Because we're living longer. And thankfully, here in Marin County, we're also healthier. So not only are we living longer, but we're living healthier lives. And one thing that we know, we have the great benefit of having the Buck Institute for Research on Aging here in Marin County. And many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with them. And they're all about studying aging and trying to figure out what triggers, aging isn't what debilitates you or kills you. It's some disease that gets triggered in the aging process. And so they're really spending a whole lot of time to figure out how can we delay that? How can we maybe not push it off entirely, because none of us saved enough money for that. And they're making real progress on that. And there's been some striking findings that they have. And we've had the privilege of having Buck researchers speak to our Marin Villages group and talk about some of their research. And one of the things that I found fascinating was, you know how we all wanted to, as we get older and as things we have to start propping things up and the like, we're quick to blame our parents, quick to blame our family and heredity, but actually that only accounts for about 20% of your health in old age. And the other 80% is actually more dependent on the environment. And by environment, yes, I mean whether your water is clean, whether your air is clear, but more than that, it's how you live your life, what you put in your body, what do you eat, how much sleep do you get, how much do you exercise, how much do you socialize. And so one of the things that we've discovered is there are things that you can do to extend what the Buck refers to as your health span. We've already figured out how to extend lifespan. We've done it here. But what we'd like to do is extend your health span, extend those years that you're healthy and active and happy. And it's a concept that actually has been on the national stage too. Our Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, previous Surgeon General, came out with an advisory, I think about almost 2 years ago now, that had researchers looking at the impact of loneliness and isolation on not your mental health, not just your mental health. Obviously, that leads to depression and a whole host of other issues, but on your actual physical health. And what he found was there were clear outcomes. It was clearly detrimental to your cardiovascular health, to your to the likelihood that you'll develop Alzheimer's or dementia, and the progress at which that will come on. And again, what was really eye-opening about that is that's something you can do something about. Marin County, also the county did an assessment too of seniors, did a survey of seniors. They got a great response, and they were trying to figure out what was the state of being a senior or an older adult in Marin right now, and what are some of the challenges that people face, what are some of the advantages. And one of the striking findings was that of the 72,000 older adults here in Marin, which is 60 and older, which is a little less than a third of the population, although we're headed to becoming a third of the population in not too many years down the road. Clearly a third of them reported that they felt left out or isolated or alone. Think about that. That's a lot of people, right? And there's a solution to that. Yay, let's have a round of applause for that. And I'm going to talk about one of those solutions, which I'm here representing. But before I do that, I usually like to start and have you think about old age. Think about your old age. You're not there yet, right. but it's coming at some point. Some of us are a little bit closer to it than others, but we're all moving there. None of us are there yet, but it's there. It looks different now than it ever did, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, let's look around. I'm reminded, I just got back, my partner and I have been together for 30 years. We just got back from New Mexico visiting his mom and his stepfather. She's 92, he's 95, he's turning 95 next month. They got married 2 years ago. And they found each other through online dating.
All right.
She lived in Albuquerque. He lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They met online. He packed his dog Brandy into his truck, and he drove all the way to Albuquerque. And then the next time he went back, he sold his house. They just bought a new house together to live in because her house, her condo, had 3 floors. And so they said, well, we can't handle that because they're also sporting those super fancy walkers with the handbrakes and the titanium and the seat that has the secret pocket. Yeah. And both of them use them. So it's kind of funny to see when it's commute time at their house. Anyway, so they bought a house together, 1-story house, and they're happy as can be. And I got back to have a conversation with my mom, who's replacing her roof, and I asked her if she wanted any help. My mom lives in the same house I grew up in, down in Saratoga, so down in the South Bay. She lives alone. She's on her own. She needs a new roof. So I said, can we help you out with that? And she said, I bought 2 roofs. She's already, over the years, she has bought 2 roofs. She said, I know how to buy a roof. She finally let my brother line up some bids because he's a general contractor and he builds homes. And so my point of all that is getting older looks different because it is different for all of us in the room. And here are some images of some other people that I know who are growing older and are participating with our wonderful Marin villages. And so that brings us to one of the most important things that so I'm going to talk a lot about friendship because that's really what we're all about. We're not about, when you hear all the services that we provide or the activities that we host, it's very much like what you're doing. We're very similar organizations from what I hear. I mean, I heard just in the few remarks earlier today about all the things that you're doing. I mean, I know the reputation of the Outdoor Art Club. I am certainly grateful that we are helping you get to that $1 million mark sometime soon in the next few years as far as giving, but it's so much more than that, right? Not only are you impacting the community locally here in Mill Valley and Marin, but you're also transforming yourselves through your participation, right? It contributes a lot to your life. And that's really exactly what we do. But we do it with the fundamental also the fundamental reason of helping our members to live where they are comfortable, where they are supported, where they're safe. And in some cases, that security can come from family members, living with family members. It can come from living in an assisted living facility. It could come for those whose health dictates that. It can come from, a skilled nursing facility. It can come from relying on friends and relatives. For a lot of people, there are those options, but they're not either accessible financially or it's just not what you want. In fact, for the most part, most people there's a reason why they have stayed put in their communities, in their homes, where they have spent the last however many years, raised families, socialized with neighbors, and they don't necessarily see a compelling reason to upset that just because they're getting older, even though they might be facing a few greater challenges living independently. And so that support can come from an innovative model, such as the one that I'm going to talk about today. And it was a model, oops. No. I did it. There we go. And it was a model that had its roots, as Sheila mentioned, in Boston, a neighborhood in Boston where 25 years ago, some neighbors got together and were talking about what their plans were as they aged. And of course, these days, a normal pattern seems to be if you're raising your families grow up, they go away to college, they may come back, they may oftentimes don't come back, can't come back to live and work and raise a family in the community where they were raised. They end up a whole host of places across the country, right? So these neighbors decided, well, what if we just relied on one another? I mean, they were kind of looking at what would it require for them to stay in their homes. And barring any kind of major health issue that they might have, they talked about they were practical things like, if I'm no longer driving, how am I going to get to the grocery store? If something, if I need to change a light bulb and my kids forbid me from getting on a ladder, how am I going to change the light bulb? All those sort of practicalities of day-to-day living. And they figured, well, we'll just help one another out. Or we'll find other neighbors here in our neighborhood that I'm sure would be willing to pitch in. And it turns out they were right. And so what Beacon Hill Village did was they built this community where they would draw from one another, which is important, but also others that lived in their neighborhood, that cared about their neighborhood, that cared about them, to help them out with some of the realities of living independently in your own home. And some of those things included simply, social opportunities, new education, learning about new things, learning about new resources, being guided to resources in your community, whether it was vendors, painters, electricians, or if it was home health care aides or things like that. It was having a circle of people that you could go to and rely on for advice and for help. And again, it was some of those day-to-day tasks. So they ended up sort of formalizing that into an organization. And along the way, people across the country heard about it. And they thought, wow, that's a great idea. I think that's something that we could start here. And one of those people was a woman by the name of Luli Sutro, who lives in Kentfield, not far from me. And she was on the grand jury here in Marin County, where they were looking at the fragmentation of services available to older adults. This is 15 years ago in Marin. Some things don't change, or some things change very slowly, but there is change. And she said, this sounds really innovative. This sounds like something we could start. She went and talked to the group. She brought it back. She gathered a group of friends, as so often happens with organizations that are providing critical services. And they just started to think through what that might look like. And they started to recruit. They started to recruit members, and they began recruiting volunteers as well. And it was the same design. It was the exact same design, which is local neighbors helping one another. And it was going to be, this effort was going to be entirely volunteer-led. Even though at some point, and I'll talk about that in a second, we needed some sort of infrastructure, some sort of paid staff and infrastructure. The idea was this would forever be a self-help model, that it would forever be the members and volunteers, as we like to call them, villagers, regardless of whether you're a member or a volunteer or both, that they would be the ones deciding what's best for them. They would be the ones that decided what kind of volunteer help do we need. They would be the ones that decided what would we like to do socially. Not surprisingly, happy hour has won out, among a lot of other things, like walking groups. Here in our Mill Valley Village has how many different walking groups? 2 right now. It's had more than 2. My guess is we'll have, at various levels. It has a group that someone had a bright idea. Wouldn't it be fun to sit around and do a read-through as if we were producing a play and we were the actors? And so someone launched that group and it's sold out, right? And so they're doing it. And so again, it was people coming together to decide, what is it that would make me more fulfilled? What are the things that I want to hear about? Who do I want to hear from? What do I want to do? And then they just organized it. And the important thing was that this wasn't programming to happen at a senior center or at a single location. And as a matter of fact, I'm always struck by, when I look at our members and when I talk to our members, the idea that they don't picture themselves going to a senior center. Not that there's anything wrong with the senior center, but that's just not where they are. They want to be reconnected to the same familiar local businesses and parks and just features and the wonderful things about their local community, which is why they chose to live here in the first place. But they don't want to do it alone. And they want to be able to get there if they don't drive. And so Marin Villages took shape along the same lines of Beacon Hill Village. And here in Marin, what that meant is, not surprisingly, for those of us who live in Marin, we get it. We sort of really identify with our little local community, right? I mean, I live in Kentfield. I worked in San Francisco for years and years. My house, I look at Mount Tam. my whole idea of Marin County was Marin from my house south. For years, I've been here for 17 years. And it wasn't until actually I got involved more locally with Marin Villages and in other ways that I discovered all the other wonderful communities. But let's face it, we tend to identify, and we're comfortable in and drawn to our local community. And so Marin Villages is organized around villages that align with Tiburon, Mill Valley, Twin Cities, Ross Valley, San Rafael, Novato. And each of those villages is run by a group of members and volunteers, a group of villagers. So it's usually in the form of a steering committee. You know, at this point, it's a fairly formalized structure, except that it's nimble because it's the members themselves that are deciding what are their priorities. And so these committees meet every month, and they decide, they look at the calendar and they see what's happening, and they decide if they have the bandwidth to offer anything more, or if they're hearing requests for something more, and they can just do it. And so you'll see there's a whole variety of sizes. Part of it is dependent on how long the village has been around, but also, obviously, part of it is because of the population centers. So we have a large village like Mill Valley Village, and we have smaller villages. So each has its own character and culture. Overall, we've grown to about 570 members. I think we're more than that this month. We also have about the same number of volunteers. Now, we're double counting here because almost 200 of those are members and volunteers. And I expect that that's just going to grow, that this idea, for two reasons. One, a lot of our members are discovering that, oh, I have a lot to give. I thought I would need more than I have to give, and they're discovering there's plenty for them to give. So they become volunteers. So that's one path. The other path is that there are a lot of people, probably in my generation, who and older, who are come across Marin Villages and say, well, I don't need that yet, but I'm going to need that somewhere down the road. And I'm going to get involved so that I just kind of get a sense of what it's all about, and I can, and I can get to know people. And then at some point, I'm probably going to then also become a member. And a lot of them become members sooner than they ever would have thought, not because they need the services that our volunteers provide, but because they become so connected to us, just like all of you do as members of the Outdoor Art Club, because there's a reason for supporting it financially, of course, but being a full-fledged member. And so 15 years, jump forward 15 years. And after this idea was transplanted here in Marin Valley, in Marin County, and villages sprung up somewhat organically, there is another village. There's a Sausalito village that is independent, and it's on there, and it's on its own. It sprung up around the same time. We collaborate with them all the time. They like to do their own thing. It's Sausalito, right? Understandable. And at this point, at some point, which I think was the first time or a second time we were invited to present here, we had become big enough and we were doing enough that it really required some sort of infrastructure, some sort of formal infrastructure. How do you recruit new members? How do you select them and onboard them? How do you recruit new volunteers? How do you vet volunteers? How do you how do you connect the volunteers on an ongoing basis with the needs of the members? How do you support each of the steering committees in each of the villages in actually accomplishing what they would like to do, and actually scheduling that happy hour and paying for that happy hour? And how do you do? So we grew into a full-fledged nonprofit organization, which also allows us, in addition to, I'm going to talk about this in a second, it allows us to raise money so that we can keep fees affordable, and so that we can We can try out new things. But where we are now is we've got a small staff. I'm one of 3 full-time staff people. We have 2 part-time staff members who answer the phones. We are funded, 1/3 comes from the fees that members pay. Members pay a fee, an annual fee. Members commit to joining for a year, at least a year. Most of our members, once they've joined, they continue year after year after year. In some cases, someone needs a higher level of care, they move to a skilled nursing facility, they no longer can really take advantage or participate in a way, and so they drop their membership, or not. We've got about 25 members who live at the Redwoods, who didn't start out there, but who decided, I really like being part of this group and I'm going to continue to do it. So 1/3 of our budget, our $500,000 budget, comes from those fees. You can see what the annual fee is, $500 a year for an individual. It's about $45 a month. We don't turn anyone away. Thanks to you, thanks to the Outdoor Art Club and other funders, we're able to offer a sliding scale and accommodate anybody at any income level to be members. We currently have about 15% of our membership, those 570 members, receive a discount, whether it's a 50% or 75% discount. And one of our goals was to make sure that that we were reaching people who felt that that was an impediment and that we would grow that. And so we're in the process of doing that thanks to your support. So we have some members who are receiving a steep discount and pay as little as $11 a month. All of our members pay something. In some cases, we have members whose entire membership is underwritten, maybe by a family member or something else. But for the most part, all of our members have committed to paying a fee to participate. And the reason for that is not just a philosophical one about, well, they need to have some skin in the game. It's really about making sure that everybody is completely invested in that. Let me tell you, the members that we have who are paying $11 a month, they want their $11 worth. And so they're more likely to call us when they need something. They're more likely to come out and take advantage of all the opportunities that we have because they're paying for it. So this support that we've gotten from the Outdoor Art Club is critical to us growing that population and supporting our ability to do that. And again, we're growing the percentage of members who rely on a discount or a scholarship, however you want to refer to it. So thank you for that. So who are? And
You have about 5 minutes.
I got 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to blast through these last few, and then we'll take questions. So who are our members? Well, our members are, first and foremost, remember, our goal is to keep people living independently in the place they choose, which is most likely in the home that they already live in. And so they need to be able to live there, right? So people who, needs a higher level of care are not good candidates for us. However, it doesn't mean that somebody who has in-home care can't also participate with us. But it does require us to be really frank with our members as we're bringing members on about what we can and can't provide and what kinds of, whether or not we're a good fit for them. And I'm going to get to that on the next slide. So most our members are relatively ambulatory. You heard about my mother-in-law. I mean, believe me, she's all over the place. Nothing, even though she has help with the walkers, all kinds of things we can accommodate. Wheelchairs is difficult for us to accommodate, especially if you're looking to have rides, because we don't have volunteers that are trained to do transfers from a wheelchair into a car to a wheelchair, and to be an attendant or a healthcare provider. That's not what our volunteers do. So you need to be somewhat ambulatory to take full advantage of everything. Our members need to manage their own schedules. They need to be able to recognize that a volunteer who they may or may not know is showing up at their door and that they're comfortable with that and that they're at ease with that and that that works and that they're, that they're ready. Our members choose us. They find us and then they choose us. Obviously, they're choosing us because they're paying to be members, and we choose them. Like I said, we have an onboarding process where we talk about, we want everybody to fully understand that if they've heard about us because we give rides, because our volunteers give rides, that we're not just a ride service, that we have all these other things. And if they're looking for a taxi service, we're not it. So we're really careful about that. We are equal measure social connection and the volunteer support that our volunteers provide. Ability to pay, I already talked about that. And I call it young at heart. Our members are truly, again, it's up to the members and the volunteers to decide what we look like, what our villages look like and what we do. But I gotta tell you, they are active and young and vibrant, and all of our activities show it. The things that we're not. We are not home health care. Again, these are volunteers who are providing, so we can't provide personal care. We're not domestic help. We get that question a lot. Can you get a volunteer to come in and do my dishes? What do you think the answer is?
No.
Would you?
Maybe.
You would do it if it was the right person, but generally, no, you wouldn't do it. So we don't offer that. Respite care, unfortunately, we can't be respite care to all of the caregivers who are out there because, again, our volunteers are not trained to be with someone who needs a caregiver around. We're not a taxi service. We're not rides on demand. However, we are rides. But they're volunteers who are giving rides in their personal cars. So we're not paratransit. We're not an emergency service. We're not licensed help, whether it's home health care or electrician, or we do have handymen and handy women who probably push the boundaries a bit. I don't know anything about it. But for the most part, we don't offer things that you have to be a licensed professional to offer, but we do keep a directory of a database of all those vendors who are recommended, who are used by our members and volunteers and then recommended by them. So our volunteers are local residents. They're your neighbors. They live by you. You may know them already. They are all vetted. They receive a background check. If they're driving, if they're a driver, we get a copy of their DMV report. They carry insurance if they're a driver. They carry a minimum level of insurance. We carry insurance, obviously, as a nonprofit organization with volunteers who are serving clients. So we do have that coverage. And volunteers participate alongside members. They get every privilege afforded to members except other volunteers helping them. So when you really think about it, the things that our volunteers do, the practical help are all things that a friend or a neighbor or a family member would do. It includes rides, companionship calls, companionship visits. We fulfill 1,000 requests for any one of these things a month.
Oh, wow.
Probably about 45%, so 450 of those are rides. Now, this doesn't count, remember, all the social activities that are happening, the walking groups and all of that. This is just what volunteers are providing. And the thing that you have to keep in mind, too, which we explain sometimes over and over again to our members, is the way it works is a volunteer, a vetted volunteer who comes through us, signs up for any number of these things. Maybe they provide tech help, and they'll also give rides. So they receive an email every single day that says, these are the things that are on the board. We call it the dashboard. These are the requests that members have made. Members call the office. They don't go online. They call the office, and that gives us control over what gets posted, but it also gives us an opportunity to know what's going on with our members and to be able to really help them in ways maybe that they haven't figured out yet, or to better help them based on what they think they need. So all the calls that come into the office are answered by a person, a conversation. We put the request up. Volunteers see those requests. They can go to a dashboard and they can just pick them up. We get a confirmation. We call the member and say, Guess who your volunteer is? Patty Flynn Boston is going to come and drive you to your doctor appointment. Here's her number. She's going to be calling you. After the request happens, the volunteer does get an opportunity to give feedback to us. Our volunteers are our eyes and ears out in the field, and so they're constantly telling us things, things that we ought to know that, again, helps us to be a better friend, a more supportive help to all of our members. So we would love it if any of you might consider being that friend. We will have pamphlets on the back table. There's a pamphlet for membership. There's a pamphlet for volunteering. You're welcome to grab them. I didn't bring enough for the whole room. I figured I wasn't going to get all of you today. But if you have any more questions, you're always welcome to call on any one of our friendly staff in the office, but especially me. And I'm sure Sheila, somebody can share I'm glad to have my contact information shared. Any of you, you're welcome to call me at any time if you have any questions about what we do, or you think you have somebody who might be interested in becoming a villager.
Can we give it up for John Power?
Give it up.
You have to stay here for questions, but that was wonderful. Thank you. Oh my gosh, you're so much taller than I am. I just learned so much, and I'm very appreciative of learning so much more. Before we start to take questions, I actually want to also direct everyone to the website.
Please.
The website for Marin Villages is so well organized, and then subheading on that on a menu, you can look into Mill Valley Villages as well, or one of the other ones within our county. I got so exhausted just looking at the social schedule that was posted, and I'd already had 2 cups of coffee. Unbelievable. So we are going to take questions now. Where's our lovely AV team? Oh, there's our lovely AV team. All right.
I know this isn't necessarily a question to you, but reading about what's been going on with the cuts to medical research, which I'm sure is going to impact the Buck Institute. Do you have any feeling about how your cooperation with them might be affected?
And I'm supposed to repeat the question.
Oh, yeah.
What I believe the question was that wondering whether cuts to research would affect the research that the Buck Institute does and Marin Village's connection to it.
Yes.
And I do happen to know, because I receive his updates, but Eric Burden, who's the head of the Buck Institute, sent out a message to the community just, I think, last week that talked about what their concerns were as far as the existing contracts that they have or future contracts. I know that they're going to do everything they possibly can. We'll look for all kinds of opportunities. We did a 6-month learning session with the Buck where we had a member of the Buck staff, actually Brian Van Weel, who's the chief philanthropy officer, and a total nut for all that they're doing. Like, he's so into it. And we would convene once a month on a Zoom with our members and talk about all their research. And then he would bring in other research and stuff. So we're going to continue to do that. We're going to take advantage of that asset as it is for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
Another question, way at the back. Yes.
Hi there, good afternoon, John. Thank you for the great presentation. I'm wondering how much cross-pollination there is sort of between the different, when you talk about gatherings, how much cross-pollination is there between the different groups within Marin?
So the question seemed to be, how much do the branches of Marin Villages actually interact with each other? I like the cross-pollination word. How much cross-pollination is there among the different groups within Marin?
It's a great question, and it's something that we've been really acutely aware of, to be honest, for the last few years. The activities that are happening in the separate villages are generally open to all. So they can attract, so if you see a hiking group, let's say that you live in San Rafael, and you really want to participate in that hiking group that's here in Mill Valley Village, that has been for some time available But people didn't really do that, right? I mean, because they stuck with what they were comfortable and who they were comfortable with, I think, for the most part. And it wasn't until we started really consciously convening, doing villages-wide events and communications. Like we had a Twin Cities Village, a guy that was doing, they were doing a bocce at the Bocce Federation in San Rafael once a month. We said, how about if we just open it up to all villages? And all of a sudden we have something that brings people in from all villages. We do an annual fundraiser. It's a thrift store. Congratulations, all of you, on your sale recently, your estate sale.
Yay, Patty.
Fantastic. I know what kind of work it takes because we do an annual, we have for the last 4 years done an annual, we call it a thrift, pop-up thrift boutique. And we do it in a retail space up at Northgate Mall. And that was the first time I think that we were doing from a fundraising standpoint. And we needed a lot of volunteers for that, obviously, right? I mean, you all know that. So we had 80 volunteers who came out over a course of 3 months to help us collect the donations, create the stores, and sell all the merchandise. And in the process, not only did they really surprise themselves with how good a job they could do creating a store and selling all of this merchandise and making a lot of money, they got to know one another because they were from various villages. And what that set off was people would start, they got to know one another, and they would start, individual members would start to invite a friend that they met, let's say working in the pop-up, to a happy hour that was happening in their village, even though the person lives in another village. And so we've seen a lot of that. We just see more and more of that happening, which I think is a great thing. I mean, I know, I'm grateful to know that there's more to Marin than just South Marin.
Yeah. There's a lot going on. Raise your hand. More questions? Yes.
Yes. Thank you, John. Question, and I'm especially thinking about the San Rafael and Novato villages when I ask the question. Do you have bilingual staff and bilingual volunteers who are part of Marin villages?
Oh, sorry. The question was whether there is actually bilingual volunteers available for different branches of Marin villages.
So the answer is yes, we do have some bilingual volunteers, though not very many. And I would have to say that the language is a barrier for potential members to join an existing village where the majority of the members don't speak Spanish, for example, or something else. And we've really looked at how can we either be more inclusive or how can we work through other existing networks to sort of bring the benefits of what we've figured out to other communities, particularly, so for example, in San Rafael, the canal. I've had many conversations with Omar Carrera, who's the executive director of Canal Alliance. And what's funny is I approached him and said, you know, I don't have a brilliant idea on, you know, how I might be able to help you in your work and the people that live in the canal. So let's talk a little bit about what the needs are. And he said, well, the truth is, come back in 10 years.
Oh.
And he wasn't joking. He said, do you know what the average age of a person in Marin is? It's 47 years old. Do you know what it is in the canal? It's like 30. It's like in the low 30s. So he said, we don't have a huge population of older adults living on their own that lack, you know, transportation, some of these other things. They're living with families. They're providing childcare. It's a whole different situation for those families. He said, at some point, this population, you know, they're going to age. And the county knows that too, because in the study that the county did, they're already anticipating that there's going to be a greater proportion, not just of older adults, but older adults from communities of color that have a greater need, which actually the county is going to have to help need. You know, we're the safety net before they actually need the safety net for a lot of people, especially those that are on scholarship with us. They're not eligible for some of the, you know, county or government services, and yet they're kind of in an in-between, in-between place. So we'll see how that works out. We're actively engaged in those discussions, just like I have, talk about another world, West Marin. I've had several conversations with folks who live out in West Marin. I know it's not a language or cultural thing. Well, no, it is a cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing.
And immediately I got pushback from locals living out there saying, we don't need anybody to come in and tell us what we can do. And I said, good, because I wasn't offering that. I was going to tell you how you can tap your own local folks as volunteers to help support older adults who are isolated and who need support. And so it's a great question. It's something that's top of mind for us and that's not going to go away for us. We're really committed to that. But it's a great question.
Yeah, excellent explanation. Any other questions? Well, I would like to wrap up with just one quick anecdote. Is I have a friend who calls another woman who, through Marin Villages, found this volunteer to call her and speak with her for an hour a week. And my friend relates this story without realizing, I think, how much the back and forth is. The woman who gets the call is helping the woman who makes the call as much as anything else. And I hope we all give John Power a round of applause and good luck. Thanks, John. Refresh.